We are on Daf Kufchav Gimel Amid Beis 123b, and the Mishnah, the Bryce had said that at first muktzah was completely all items were considered muktzah besides for a few typically used main essential items, and chazav v'tira, and then again they permitted it 3 times until it was what remained muktzah was Meser Hagadol, the great saw, which was a list of a few items that people are very particular about. They have a very particular function that is not a Shabbos function, it's muktzah. And Abaye offered that the chazav v'tira was first, they permitted a vessel that has a Shabbos use, that has a use that's permissible on Shabbos, and you need it for itself. And then the second was that you need it for its place. So think, let's say, cutlery. You have a fork, a knife, and you need it for itself. So then you can use it. Then the second, they said, even if you don't need it for itself, but you need its place. It's sitting on the table, and you want to put it in the drawer or vice versa, then you're allowed to move it. And the third was to say that even something that is kli shemalachto le'isser, something that generally is prohibited, like a hammer, because it's used for construction. It's a kli shemalachto le'isser. It's a vessel whose work is a prohibited work. Nevertheless, it's going to be permissible if you need it for itself, meaning you need to do a permissible thing with it. And then the last bit said that even if it's something that requires 2 hands. Now, Rav is going to argue and say, well, the first distinction you made, that you said something that is a distinction between, do you need it by itself, meaning you need the vessel for itself, like a fork to use it, and the second was that you need it for its place. Rabbi says, no, those are actually one and the same, because they're both l'tzorach. They both are there to feed a need, whether it's the need of the vessel itself, the utensil itself, or whether it's the need of its place. Either way, it's going to be functioning it's going to be providing a need, and therefore that should count as one. The permission to use a vessel that is a non-prohibited, that's used for a non-prohibited act, and you need it, whether you need it for itself or to make place for something else. So this is the 4th wide line on Kuf Chav Gimel Amid Beis 123b, 4th wide line. Amar le Rava Mechti. Rava said, let's analyze this. Hitiru katani. They made something permissible. What was it? Based on if it's a permissible item, an item that's used for permissible things, like cups, plates, bowls, chairs, buckets, many other permissible items that the usage is permissible on Shabbos, and you're allowed to move it. Mali l'tzarech gufa, mali l'tzarech mekayme. Who cares whether the need is because I need the bucket itself, or I need the place, I need to move it because it's in the way and I want to put something else there. Either way, it'll be l'tzarech, it'll be for a need, and that should count as one. So level 1 that they permitted was kli shemalachta leheter, vessels that are a malacha, that's a permissible malacha, and you need it for itself or for its place. A vessel that it is a permissible use, regardless if you need it for itself to use the bucket, the plate, or you need its place. And then they said not only that, but even to move it from the shade, from within the sun to the shade, meaning you don't need to use it and you don't need the place. You just want to move it away because it's in the sun, and you want to move it to the shade. Now, whether that means that you have to have some sort of reason, some sort of benefit to move it, and Chamal Atzeil means, okay, it's in the sun, and I want to move it to the shade, but I don't really need the vessel, and I don't need its place, but I'm doing it out of some sort of benefit for the vessel. That's the more the simpler reading, but not actually the simpler understanding. It's a simpler reading that the Gemara is giving me a reason, but that would mean that I'd have to have some sort of reason before I move anything or touch anything on Shabbos. I can only move it on Shabbos if I have some reason. I can't just pick it up just because, even if it's a permissible item.
So what would be an example of that? I mean, I can imagine you could come up with some kind of teretz why you just feel like, I mean, I think of a kid playing with something. Sometimes you see a kid they're just playing with something that you're just like, what are you doing? You know, leave it alone, put it down. But still for the kid, I mean, he's having fun with it. I mean, it's occupying him. It's giving him something to do with his hands.
A fidget in your hand. I don't know. Yeah. That's not a need. Many things. The question is, can I move something? Do I have to have a reason to move something? Or is it just not muksa? That's a fundamental question.
Right. But I'm trying to find out what would be an example of moving something that you have no need to move it, but you're just moving. But I mean, what would be the need? Because you could always come up with, I just feel like it. I just,
Right. Meaning I don't need the place. I just want to move this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to use the place. I just don't like where it is. I want to move it there. To me, aesthetically, it looks better. I don't know, but there's no benefit to anyone but in my own mind. Can I move it or not?
Right.
So Rashi seems to say that there's no muksa to it. It's totally permissible. You can do what you want. But the language of the Gemara, and some learn this way, is that there has to be some sort of reason. You want to move it out of the sun into the shade, but it's still not a need, and that's what this level is. Okay. Then they went ahead and they added another level, which is that even a prohibited item, meaning something that is typically used for something that's prohibited to do on Shabbos, like a hammer, which is used for construction. Nevertheless, I can move it both if I need to use the hammer itself, or it's in the way I need its place. So I left a hammer on a chair, and I need to use the chair for sitting at the table. I can move the hammer because I need its place.
But I mean, like, what? I'm sorry for interrupting, but
no, go ahead.
What? Like, we all know. I mean, in our minds, we know, things that you can and can't do on Shabbos. So I'm just kind of like backing into it, so to speak. But like, if there were a radio on a chair and I wanted to use the chair, I can't move the radio.
Why not?
I thought I can't use the radio. It's muksa. Can't move it.
Well, hammer's muksa too, but it's what muksa.
That's what I'm asking. I know you could use the hammer because I could find a reason to use the hammer, but I can't find. There's nothing I can do with a radio.
No.
The chair
First
is
of all, there are plenty of things you can do with the radio. There are plenty of things you can do with the radio, but the point over here is that when I'm talking about that, you need the item, you need its place.
But the chair is a basis the davar muksa.
But not necessarily. That would mean that you intentionally put it there in order for it to be the basis of the muksa item. Usually, it's just that you forgot it there. Very few people say, "All right, I'm leaving my hammer on the chair because that's the right place for it." It means that Friday you were fixing something and you put the hammer down on the chair for a moment, and the chair got pushed onto the table and you didn't realize that it was there. And then Shabbos, you come to sit down and boom, it's there. That's not a bus. It's because you forgot it there. So the chair is not a muktzah that it is on account of being the base of a muktzah item, the support of a muktzah item. It actually was just forgotten there. And I need the space. I don't need the hammer itself, but I need the space so I can move the hammer so I can sit there. However, but if I'm moving the item from the sun to the shade, meaning I don't have a need for the item or its place, that's going to be prohibited. since it's a muktzah item, since it's an item that is prohibited to be used on Shabbos in its main function, and I don't need it for anything else, and I don't need its place, I just want to move it from one place to another on account of even if it's beneficial to the item, nevertheless, I'm not allowed to move. And still, there would only be one person, but not by two people, until we said even two-person items like a big saw. It's going to be prohibited. All vessels are permitted to be moved on Shabbos, even with two people, besides for this great saw, because people are particular about not using it for anything but its main purpose, and a few other things we mentioned before. Abaye asked Rava, based on what you're saying, all permissible items can be used, can be moved entirely, and all items that generally are used for a prohibited item, for prohibited use, are allowed to be moved if you need it itself or you need its place. So what about meducha? We saw earlier that a mortar and pestle, im yesh ba shum, if it has garlic in it, metalton, I said, then you can move it because of the garlic in there, so you can move even the vessel. But if not, you cannot move it. Why can't you move it? After all, you need either it to sit on, as we saw earlier, or you need its place. So Gemara says, no, he didn't need it at all. He didn't need to sit on it. He didn't need its place. He just wanted to move it into the shade because of the sun. We ask another question. This is what we saw earlier, that if somebody used this crusher as a cutting board, that it's prohibited to move it. He said so too. He doesn't need its place. He doesn't need it anymore as a cutting board. Obviously, he can't crush with it on Shabbos, so there's no reason to move it. The only reason he wants to move it is into the shade. He doesn't want it in the sun, and it's therefore it's prohibited. On Rabbi Chanina, so Rabbi Chanina just gives a little background to what went on here in the institution of muktzah. This Mishnah, this teaching, was taught in the days of Nehemiah, at the beginning of the return of Bnei Yisrael to Eretz Yisrael and rebuilding of the second Beis Hamikdash. And Nehemiah, being of the leaders from Bavel, they came back, and the last of the Sfarim and Tanakh. So the Chsiv, it says over there, by Yom Mehema, on those days, Re'isiv Yehuda, he came to Judea in Yehuda, and he saw Dorchen Gitos b'Shabbos, people who were stomping in their wine press on Shabbos, Umevina Aremos, and bringing in bundles from the fields, and therefore he needed to show people that you can't just do work on Shabbos. So in order to provide Shabbos with the sense of Shabbos, of learning Torah and resting and being available to daven and to do spiritual things, they said, okay, all muktzah. And as the Rambam explains, I think seemingly from this Gemara, that the basis for muktzah was so that people not be preoccupied with things. They'd be preoccupied with the oneg Shabbos, with the pleasantness of Shabbos, with the relaxation of Shabbos, with the Torah learning of Shabbos, with the spirituality of Shabbos. Muktzah provides a detachment from as many items as possible, but they started off very strict, saying only the very basic utensils can be used, and then progressively, as people got used to actually observing Shabbos and being into Shabbos, they permitted more and more vessels, and ultimately it is at this point that this Mishnah said all items are permissible besides for the Meser HaGadol, etc. Amar Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar says, Kanim, the Mishnah that we're going to learn soon about the rods, umaklas, and about the sticks, and glustera, and about a peg or a piece of wood, meducha, and the mortar and pestle. Kulan kedem ataras kelim nishna. all these brises says these were originally when all vessels were prohibited. That's when this was also prohibited. But ultimately, as things became more permissible, these would also be included in the permission. And later, the Gemara is going to tell us that Rabbah disagrees and says no, they could all be even after permission was given. They would also these brises would still apply, or these mishnahs would apply. So what are these mishnahs? The Tanan we learned. Let's see their kanim. So we know there were showbreads in the Beis Hamikdash, a table with 12 breads, each one a tefach thick, and they sat on top of each other. In order for them to remain fresh, they would need air between them. So there were rods that were basically like racks, shelves above the table to hold the breads. So the Mishnah says, not arranging it or removing it are permissible on Shabbos. So the way the weekly service of the showbreads, the lechem apanim, was on Shabbos, was that every Shabbos they'd bring in the fresh bread and take out the old bread, and they would slide them in and out so that the table was always full with the bread. Now, the Mishnah is saying that removing those rods between the bread so that you can take the old ones off, and putting the rods between the new pile of breads or the loaves is going to be prohibited on Shabbos because it's a muktzah item. Now, the rods are not muktzah in and of itself. It has a purposeful use on Shabbos. I need it. It has a permissible use. There's nothing prohibited about what you're doing about making space between breads. And nevertheless, it's prohibited. Must be this is in the original state where everything was prohibited besides for the few basic utensils. And therefore, these rods that were made as space between them and between the breads were not permissible. And therefore, the breads, Friday, they would take out the rods of last week's breads. And Sunday, they would put in the rods of the new breads. But from the beginning of Shabbos to the end of Shabbos, both the old and new breads had no rods between them. The second Mishnah about the sticks. What are these sticks? Maklis, dakin, chalakan ayasham, menichalak sefer, valkasav chaver, v'telel mavshit. Generally, in order to skin an animal in the Beis Hamikdash after it was shechted as a korban, they had these pillars with hooks on it, and the animals would be placed there and skinned. But on Erev Pesach, where everybody was bringing their korban Pesach, there was an enormous backlog of people that needed to skin their korban. So what they would do is they had these rods that acted like hooks, and the rods would go on two people's shoulders, facing each other, and then they would stand the animal between them, hanging on these rods over their shoulders, and they would skin the animal. However, on Shabbos, and the Mishnah says those rods could not be used, and Rabbi Eliezer is saying, why can't they be used? They're not muktzah on account of you're not doing a prohibited act, and you need it, and it's actually a necessary thing. It's just a rod, and nevertheless it's prohibited. Must be that this is in the original state where everything was prohibited besides the few main essential items. And the halacha there, the Mishnah says that on Shabbos, Rabbi Lezer, on the 14th day, meaning the Korban Pesach day, that happened on a Shabbos. Now we go to Kuf Chav Dalet Amud Aleph 124a. Instead of the rods, what he would do is he would put his hand on the other fellow's shoulder, and the other fellow would also put his hand on his. So they each used their left hand to support the animal, and the right hand they would work on together to skin the animal. And in this way they could skin the animal. And what's the third case? The glustera. Glustera is basically this piece of wood that was used as a lock to keep the door shut and jammed. The Tanan we learned Naga Sheish Beresha Glustera, this piece of wood that had a knob at its end and could be used for other items. Rabbi Shoy Meshemtem and Apesach was Shabbos. He can take it out of one doorway and put it into another on Shabbos. Reb Tafrenem Areika Chalakelim Metalta B'Chotzer, and Rabbi Tafret says no, you can move it like any vessel in the courtyard. So why would you not be able to move it? According to the first opinion, it must be that on account of muksa, even though that it's just a functional use of a piece of essentially a peg, a lock, a latch, and nevertheless is prohibited. Must be it's in the original state of where all items were prohibited as a muksa, even something that's not meant for prohibited items, it still is going to be muksa in only besides for the few essential items. And then eventually, when people got into Shabbos, they made more and more items permissible. Maducha, and what's the mortar and pestle? Hada Amra, that we said earlier about that it needs to have shum in there, and needs to have garlic in there in order for you to be allowed to move it. Amar Rabbah, so Rabbah challenged Rabbi Eliezer and said, no, we don't have to say these four cases are talking about in the original state of prohibition when Nehemiah prohibited all items besides for the few essentials. How do you know that that's the case? Maybe it's even after vessels were re-permitted, and nevertheless, Nishnu Kanem, we learned this halacha of the rods, and time amai, Fushi. And why do you need the rods? So that the breads not become moldy. And one day you bring in the breads in the after sometime on Shabbos, and in the evening already you're putting in the rods. It's not going to be a muktzah. So what Rabbah is saying is, since you didn't really need it, that's why it wasn't permissible. Similarly, maklas, these rods for skinning the korban pesach as well. It wasn't needed because we have the option of using your arm on your neighbor's shoulder. Maklas, after Rabbi Eliezer, because you can do it like Rabbi Eliezer. Glustera, this knobbed piece of wood. Could Rabbi Yanai, like Rabbi Yanai explained, he said that the issue over there is not a muktzah issue; it's a carrying issue. We're talking about a courtyard that has not been an eruv, a joint meal has not been made there. So we've seen this a little bit, just to clarify the halacha. Even if you have an enclosed courtyard, meaning it's walled in, so it's a private domain. However, each individual house belongs to one person. The courtyard services many houses, many places. So since many families and many households, so therefore the courtyard itself constitutes its own domain. Since the people in the courtyard don't have a right to go into every one of the houses because they're individual houses. Therefore, you cannot carry from the courtyard into the house or from the house into the courtyard. You may carry within the courtyard because the courtyard is its own domain and it's enclosed. But since you didn't make a joint meal where all the houses essentially are joining in a meal and therefore it becomes a communal space, therefore you can't carry from one to the other. And that's what's going on. And this peg, this piece of wood that's blocking the door, that is a lock on the door, it's in the doorway. And the question is the doorway itself constituted as a part of the house, or is within the doorway a part of the courtyard? Rabbi Yeshua then it's a part of the house, and therefore you can't carry it into the courtyard. And you're moving something from the house into the courtyard. And Rabbi Tarfon says no. The doorway itself, within the doorway, constitutes the courtyard, and therefore you're allowed to move it within the courtyard because it was already in the courtyard. Meducha, and what about the mortar pestle with the garlic in there? the reason why it needs the garlic in there, maybe that's the opinion of Rabbi Nechemia, who we saw earlier, who says that even a permissible item, meaning an item whose use is permissible, can only be used for its intended purpose and may not be used for any other purpose. And we're about to see that in this mission. Any vessels that you're allowed to move on Shabbos, you're allowed to move regardless of whether you need them or not. Here, this would indicate that you can move it for any reason, not only if you need it yourself, but even if there's no necessity. And indeed, Rashi later says that that's a halacha, that you can move it for any item whose general use is permissible on Shabbos, can be moved entirely, without any reason, it seems. Rabbi Nechemia, however, Rabbi Nechemia says, you're only allowed to move it for need. So the Gemara is going to explain what is l'tzarech of shalei l'tzarech. What does it mean for need or not for need? My l'tzarech and my shalei l'tzarech. So Amar Rabba. So Rabba explained l'tzarech davar shemalachta let l'tzarech gufay. That what we're talking about here is a vessel whose main purpose is a permissible use on Shabbos, and therefore it is a klisha malachta leheter. It's a vessel whose creative work is permissible on Shabbos, so you're allowed to move it, but only for its need, and you can move it for its need, meaning you need to use it as a function. And if you don't need it, means you're moving it because you need its place. However, a vessel whose primary use is a prohibited use on Shabbos, such as a hammer, which is usually used in construction. So that may only be used if you need it itself, meaning you need the hammer in order to open a coconut, but not if you need it for its place. It's on a chair and you want to use the chair, you're not allowed to move it. That's the opinion of Rabbah. Sorry?
How about like keys? So I've got a key to my house. There's an area of Portland. I can carry a key to my house. How about a key to my office? I'm not going to go over there. Can I carry a key to my office on Shabbos?
So now you're asking something that is something else. It's really a vessel which is permissible, meaning I'm allowed to unlock the door. It's simply I don't have access to it.
Right.
But you're allowed to walk there. It's within the Tuchum. So there's no prohibition for you to do that. It's just simply you're not likely to do it. So that's a good case of no need at all. You just want to carry it.
And it's mutter to carry it?
That's permissible. In any case, you're carrying it with multiple keys on the ring. So right. So the ring actually has permissible and non-permissible items. As long as the permissible items are of significance and of value, so you're allowed to move it in any case because you're moving the permissible item. So if you have your car key and your house key on the same ring, you can move it. So this was Rabbah's opinion. And Rabbah says that the meaning of our Mishnah is a permissible item, you're allowed, an item that's use is permissible on Shabbos, you're allowed to move regardless of whether you need it itself or its place. But an item whose use typically is prohibited on Shabbos, if you need it itself for permissible use, you're allowed to use it, but not for its place. However, Asar Rabbi Nechemia and Rabbi Nechemia, Rabbi Nechemia is being strict and says, no, even an item whose usage is typically permissible, you're not allowed to use it if you're just moving it for its place and not for using it. Amalei Rava. So Rava said, what are you talking about? Again, the same argument that we started today with. If we're talking about letzorech, meaning it's for its need, who cares if the need is that I need to functionally need the vessel or I need to move it because I need its place? Either way, there's a need, so I'm allowed to move it. I need its place. He's calling that not necessary, not a need. Elama Rava. So rather, Rava says letzorech when our Mishnah says you're allowed to move vessels for its need, that means you're moving it with the purpose of either using it itself or I need its place. Either way, it's going to be permissible. It's a vessel whose primary use is permissible, and I need its place or I need it itself. I'm allowed to use it. What does it mean I'm allowed to move something with no need? That means even from the sun to the shade. I don't need it. I don't have a need to move it. I just want to move it. And what about a prohibited item? An item whose function primarily is prohibited. If I need its place or I need itself, meaning I need it itself. I want to use it as a paperweight. I want to use it to break to crack a nut. So then I'm allowed to move it. Or if I need its place, it's on a chair and I want to be able to sit on the chair, I can move it. However, but for no functional use either of it or its place, then I'm not allowed to move it because it's an item whose primary function, primary use is a prohibited use on Shabbos. I cannot move it just cause. Even if I want to move it from shade, from the sun to shade. But Asar Rabbi Nechemia comes and says, no, he disagrees. He's stricter than that. He says, Rabbi Nechemia says, even a vessel whose primary function is permissible on Shabbos, I need to have a reason to move it on Shabbos, either to use it or to use its space. But just to move it out of the sun into the shade, even that's going to be prohibited. Yasav Rav Safra v'Rachav v'Ravuna v'Ravuna v'Archinina v'Yasvi v'Kamri l'Rabba. They said, according to Rabbi Nechemia, according to the opinion of Rabbi Nechemia, who says that I'm not allowed to move a vessel, even a permissible vessel. I'm not allowed to move it unless it's for its original function. Well, Hanikaras, once you've finished your bowl of soup, how do you move the soup off of the table? I'm not allowed to move it, according to Rabbi, even if I need its place. I can only move it in order to use it. What's its usage? To eat out of it. Now that I'm finished eating and I want to take clear of the table, I wouldn't be able to move it. How's that possible? John, I'll answer your question in a second. So how do you clear the table from these plates? Amaluhu Rav Safra, neither they have a graf shel rei. That this is similar to a bedpan, which we said that it's disgusting to leave it around, and therefore you're allowed to move it, even though it is muksa, but you're allowed to move it for the pleasure of Shabbos, so that you don't have something disgusting around. Similarly, clearing the table is going to function in the same way. Another question like that we asked. So Abaye asked Rabbi himself, according to you, how do we move these plates after we've used them? Rav Safra, Chavrin took him immediately to have a graf shel rei. So Rav Safra said, he said to him, Rav Safra Chavrin, Rav Safra, our friend, he already explained that it's permissible, just as a bedpan's permissible on account of that it's disgusting to leave around. John asked, what about once you pick it up to move it? Can I just move it off, or am I allowed to move it? So for sure, once I pick this up, I'm allowed to move it into its proper place. A klisha malachta le'iser, a vessel whose primary use is prohibited on Shabbos. But I need it. I need it either for itself, and so therefore I take the hammer to break to break the coconut, or I need it because it's sitting on the chair and I want to use the chair. Once I pick it up, I can put it into its proper place. I'm allowed to move it wherever it needs to go. There is a machlokas, however, if that same rule applies to other muksas that we said that you're not allowed to move unless there's certain needs. And then now that it's in my hand, for whatever reason, it became in my hand. Either I forgot that it's muksa, I didn't know, whatever it may be. Now that it's in my hand, or I had some other permission to move it, am I allowed to? Do I need to drop it immediately wherever it is, or once I have it in my hand, am I allowed to put it away? But everybody agrees by this type of muksa of klisha malachta le'iser, a vessel who's essentially a usable functional vessel, and it's muksa because its primary function is prohibited on Shabbos. Here, everybody agrees. Once you had permission to pick it up because you need its place, or because you're using it in a permissible way, such as the hammer to crack a nut, that would, once it's in your hands, you can go and put it away wherever it needs to go.
I wanted to ask a question about moving from the sun to the shade. So this is to say that let's say I had something that I'm afraid the sun is going to fade it. It's going to fade the color, and I want to get it out of the sun. To preserve the thing from that happening, I can't move it.
Correct. And whatever that may be that you're not allowed to move, there were various opinions what that stage is. But whatever stage, whenever we talk about that you're not allowed to move it mechamal itself from the sun to the shade, it's not a functional use. It's just to save the item. But I'm not using it. I don't need the item now. I'm trying to save the item so I can use it later. That I'm not allowed to do. So Abaye asked Rava, you, according to your interpretation, that you're allowed to move even a item whose primary function is prohibited, a kalisha malachta le'isr. Nevertheless, you're allowed to move it either because I need it itself or I need its place. So the mortar and pestle that we saw earlier that you can only move with garlic in it, why can't I move it? Same question we see now the third time. Why? Why can't I move it? So he said, where he said, we're talking about you moving it from the sun to the shade, meaning you don't have any function for it. You don't need to sit on it. You don't need its place. You simply don't want it where it is. That's not enough to move it on Shabbos because it's a primarily prohibited use. We asked another question. What about that crusher that was used as a cutting board? This ali that he used as a cutting board. After you finish cutting, you're not allowed to move it. There too, he said, it's talking about that you're moving it from the sun to the shade. But because we said on Yantiv, you're not allowed to support a pot with a piece of wood, with firewood. Also, you can't use it as a door stopper. Why? Why can't I do it? We're talking about Yantiv, and on Yantiv, I'm allowed to make a fire. If I'm allowed to make a fire, then firewood is actually a vessel that's permissible, has a permissible use. And nevertheless, you're telling me I can't move it for itself, meaning I want to use the wood as a doorstop, and I can't. And you say that I can't move it. That means I'm not allowed to move it even for its own functional use, even though that it's a vessel that's typically permissible to use on Yantiv because I'm allowed to make a fire. So he says, no, Hasam Hainu time. But there, the reason is something else. On Shabbos, it's actually a vessel whose primary function is prohibited. So we're concerned that if you move it on Shabbos as a doorstop, on Yantiv as a doorstopper, you may use it on Shabbos as a doorstopper, and therefore it's prohibited. Gzeira Yantiv to Shabbos. So we prohibited Yantiv on account of Shabbos. So well, Shabbos itself is permissible because it's true that the primary function of this firewood is for fire. But when I want to use it for itself, it's like the hammer to crack a nut. I'm using the wood as a door stopper, and so it should be permissible. Because it's permissible to be used for itself, whether it's for it to be used as a doorstop or to get rid of it, to move it out of its place, because I want to be able to close the door. Either way, it should be permissible. The Gemara says, no, here there's a new concept in Muktzah. There, up until now, everything we were talking about in Muktzah was a vessel. It is a functional, categorized as a vessel item. And we want to use it either for its primary function, for a secondary function, we need its place, but we want to move a vessel. Here we're coming to a new form of Muktzah, a non-vessel. A non-vessel is Muktzah on account of that it isn't something. It's one language is l'chazalamidi, it has no use, or it's a Muktzah machmas gufo. It's Muktzah on account of what it is or isn't. So you have stones in the street, various forms like that. And firewood, it's not a vessel, and it doesn't have a function for Shabbos, so therefore it's muksa. And that's a stronger muksa. You can't move even for to use for itself. So this is not a vessel, and therefore you can't even move it for its own function. Migas Rina. So now the Gemara challenges. Okay, so you're saying Yantiv, I'm not allowed to move this because I can't move it on Shabbos. Do we really say I can't do things on Yantiv that I'm on account of? Maybe it's going to be done on Shabbos as well. Migas Rina. But now we learned Meshila Peres Derech Aruba Yantiv. If somebody put fruit, they used to put fruit to dry on the roof, and the sun would dry it, and then suddenly in the middle of a summer's day, it starts raining, and like, oh my goodness, I got to get the fruit off the roof. So on Yantiv, you're allowed to drop it in from the skylight, from the window in the roof. But on Shabbos, you may not. On Shabbos, it's muksa. On Yantiv, I'm allowed to bring it in. So the Gemara says, you see that we allow things on Yantiv, even though on Shabbos it's prohibited. So the Gemara says, well, true. We're going to have to find a reason for that. But for sure, you're going to have to admit to me that Yantiv is there are items that are there are things that are prohibited on Yantiv, not because they are prohibited on Yantiv, but because you may confuse it with Shabbos. Mi logas rinon. Do we not say that? But tonight we learned because we see there's no distinction. The Mishnah says there's no distinction between Shabbos and Yantiv besides for cooking food, things that are ochel nefesh, things that are particular needs of people. But other than that, everything's prohibited. So you see that muksa as well is going to be prohibited on Yantiv in the same manner that it's prohibited on Shabbos. I'm Rabbi Yosef Lekashis. Rabbi Yosef says, no, that's not a question. Oh, Rabbi Eliezer, or Rabbi Yeshua. Depends on whether you follow Rabbi Eliezer or Rabbi Yeshua. What's the difference? What's that scenario? The time we learned this earlier. A mom and calf that fell into a pit. And you're not allowed to shechter both on the same day. So now the cow or the calf are in the and the calf are in the pit. And I need to get them out. So Rabbi Eliezer says you can only take one out because that you can say I'm going to shecht it on Yantiv, so it's my food, so I'm allowed to get it out. But the other one, I have to just make comfortable in there, bring some cushions in, and make it comfortable there and feed it there. Now, I'm bringing the first one up in order to shecht. And I shecht it, and then the second one, which I'm not allowed to shecht because I can't shecht a mother and calf on the same day. Therefore, I must keep the other one in there and make it comfortable. So it shouldn't die there. Rabbi Yeshua, however, Rabbi Yeshua says, you bring the first one up with the intent of shechting it, and then say, you know what? I don't like this one. I don't want to shecht it. And he tricks the system. And then he brings the second one up and can say, hey, maybe that one's better to shecht. In this way, he can shecht whichever one he wants. And so you see that according to Rabbi Eliezer, there's a strict muksa on Shabbos as well, on Yantiv as well. And according to Rabbi Yeshua, there are systems to trick the system. And therefore, the same with the roof, you can bring in, a little bit of fruit because I want to eat it, and then bring in more and just drop it in through the skylight. So Gemara says, maybe Rabbi Eliezer also agrees that I can bring in the fruit from the roof. And the reason that he does not allow bringing up the other cow from the pit that it fell into is because you're able to make it comfortable in there. But in the where you cannot save it where it is, such as the produce on the roof, it's going to get damaged from the rain. Maybe he does not say that it's prohibited on account of Shabbos, and he does allow you bringing it in, or vice versa. Inami or Adkan Lekam Rabbi Yeshua Asam, or Rabbi Yeshua didn't say that you're allowed to bring both of the calf and the mom up, only over there the Efshar Baha Rama, because I have a way to trick the system by saying, okay, I want to shech this. Actually, I'm going to want to shech the other one because that one's better for better meat. But over here, what kind of fooling are you doing? Everybody knows why you're taking it off the roof. It's clear I'm dumping all the produce in from the roof into the house. And like maybe therefore it's prohibited. Elamar of Papa, rather Papa says Lakashia, ha Beishamai, ha Beisil. Rather, the machlokas is on a different machlokas of Beishamai Beisil, and tomorrow we'll learn this machlokas of what the basis of this muktzah is on Shabbos and Yom Tov.